I'm Gilbert Cruz, editor of the New York Times Book Review, and this is the Book Review Podcast. On this week's episode, our monthly book club roundtable, hosted by MJ Franklin. Be sure to stay tuned until the end of the episode to hear what book we'll be discussing next month. It's a big one. For this month's book, I'll kick it over to MJ.
Hello, and welcome to another book club episode of the Book Review Podcast. I'm MJ Franklin. I'm an editor here at the New York Times Book Review, and for this month's book club, we're talking about The Hypocrite by Hamya. Also, quick teaser, at the end of this episode, we're going to reveal our selection for our October book club, so stick with us. But first, The Hypocrite. This was, for me, and I can't resist this selection, because personally, I love an art monster story, and I love dysfunctional family sagas, and this book is both of those things. I also personally love exploring what's new and percolating in fiction, and that's what this is. A new release that I read, and I was immediately like, I want to talk about this with other readers. And speaking of, I have two wonderful colleagues joining me in the studio. First up, we have a familiar voice, Joumana Khatib. Joumana needs no introduction. She's a fellow editor here at the Book Review. She's a frequent book clubber. She was on the podcast last week. Hi, Joumana. Welcome back.
Hi, MJ.
Joumana, you've also recently written some exciting pieces for the Book Review, including a profile of Danzy Senna ahead of the release of her book Color Television, and a review of a new novel by Virginie Despentes. I hope I'm saying her name correctly. So readers, go check those out. Also with us is Lauren Christensen, editor extraordinaire here at the Book Review. Welcome back, Lauren.
Thank you so much.
Lauren, you've also written some exciting things for the Book Review, including recently a review of Scaffolding by Lauren Elkin. So readers, go check that out. We're still in the intros and already your reading list grows. I feel like our job is done. Also, returning listeners will remember Lauren and Joumana were both here for our Headshot Book Club discussion a few months ago. That conversation was so fun, so I was like, let's get the band back together. Let's talk about a new book.
Fight.
Honestly, the characters in this book should have boxing gloves. Speaking of this book, what is it? The Hypocrite. I'm going to do a synopsis as always. The Hypocrite is a tale of a family fighting in and through art. The book opens with a famous English novelist, say that fast, walking into a theater to watch a play that his daughter, Sophia, has written. The lights go down in the theater, the show starts, and immediately the novelist realizes the play is about him, the vacation he took with Sophia a decade earlier, and the sins he committed while they were away. Meanwhile, during the show, Sophia is at lunch with her mother dissecting their family history and biding her time until the play is over, which is when Sophia will meet up with her father and talk about everything that he's just seen, what this work is, about their family dynamic, etc. The story also jumps to the past to show what really happened on that fateful father-daughter holiday, and through this tale, Hamya explores the complexities of art, family, changing social mores, etc., etc., etc. Joumana, Lauren, how'd I do? Did I miss anything? Anything you'd add?
Well, we're about to add a lot, right?
True.
Synopsis, no, that's it. Yeah.
Perfect. And as always, there will be spoilers in this discussion. So if you want to avoid spoilers, pause this episode, go read the book, and then come back to us. Or if you've already read the book or just don't care about spoilers, let's dig in. I'm going to start and just ask general question. What did you think about the book? Love it, hate it, feel complicated about it? Big picture, what are your thoughts about The Hypocrite? I'm going to start with you, Joumana, because you reviewed the book for us.
Yes, I was paid to share my opinions about this book. I really liked this book. I really like Hamya. I think she's quite smart, really sharp. She's good with structure, which is something I always love to see in a novel, is a well put together and constructed story. And that's something we can get into about The Hypocrite. I also thought this was terrifically funny. I loved that she was really writing into an ambiguous kind of moral vacuum, which, of course, this is a Me Too book. This is a post-pandemic book. It's definitely a product of the time in which it was written, and yet it was not an easy black and white hero, villain, whatever kind of story. I think that she was incredibly delicate in how she wrote all the characters. You feel gross with all of them. Everybody has her own sins. I thought it was great and very thought-provoking without being like, I don't know. Does Schoolhouse Rock have a message? I guess without being like moralistic, you know what I mean? And that is a hard thing to pull off.
What you said a moral vacuum. I think that's exactly why I was like, I need to talk about this with other readers. Everyone is so complicated. And I left and I was like, I don't know. I have my own opinions, but also they could be right. I don't know what to think about any of these characters in an exciting way. What about you, Lauren? What did you think of this book?
Yeah, I also loved it. And I think calling it, yes, of course, it's a Me Too story, but in a lot of ways, it's a post-Me Too story. It is taking a huge cultural global movement and responding to it in this very micro, this very granular way, and engaging with questions that we all talk about and think about of the ethics of autofiction and how to what extent does calling something a work of art give you license to potentially hurt people who are real and living and breathing and might even love you. And so all those questions are really interesting. And I agree, Joumana, she really handles subjects that could otherwise and are often otherwise quite clunky in art. Not to be too meta about it, but the book in our hands could have been heavy-handed, and it is not. It's about finding things cringe without being cringe. And that's a difficult project to set up for yourself, and I think she totally pulls it off.
Especially with something like this, which I think is so cerebral, this novel, but it's like Trojan horse through this really fraught setup. Someone sitting and realizing that the thing that they're about to watch is about them. I kept pitching this as like the novelistic version of that Euphoria meme. That's, wait, is this effing play about us?
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And also just on the micro level, the sad knowledge that the only way that Sophia could get her father to actually pay attention to what she has to say about him or levy any kind of criticism at him is through art, right? In this like hugely public way. There are so many layers to this project of staging a play where your dad orgasms for 10 minutes. And it's a little early in the podcast to get into that, but
also early in the show, he orgasms for 10 minutes at the start of the show. That's how it opens.
Yeah. MJ, what did you think?
I also loved this book for all of the reasons that you're mentioning. For me, the superpower of this book is that it's juggling so much so seamlessly. Again, it's the Me Too book. It's a family saga. It's about art. And I kept saying it's like about the ethics of creating art from life, but also it's about the ethics of creating art in life. So much of what especially this father is doing is hurting his family in ways that he doesn't even realize because he's so consumed with the process of making his art. He has shut out other people's emotions and is using other people as a tool, not in piece of art itself necessarily, but in the creation process. He literally uses his daughter as like a transcriptionist, and it was cool to do, but also like he didn't treat me like a person or his daughter anymore. So I really loved that. I also really loved the moral complexity of it all. Who are the villains? There's a conversation about generational change. No one is the hero here. If I do have a gripe, it does come toward the end, which I feel like some of that subtlety goes away and there is a lot of speechifying toward the end. And I think it takes aim at some easy targets, like we're talking about how the youths are out of control through a very particular barista. And I feel like we have seen that before.
Yeah.
But I think that the arguments themselves were so strong that I was able to get over even those like small hiccups to me or hurdles. And I was just like totally immersed in this book. With that out of the way, we have mentioned that this book is juggling a ton of stuff. So I'm curious to know what you're most interested to talk about. Like what stood out to you out of everything that they were juggling?
I really personally loved, you mentioned the structure before, how she really toggles between these two settings of the father watching himself being portrayed on a stage live and this restaurant nearby, presumably, where Sophia is having lunch with her mother, this boozy, increasingly off the rails, emotional reckoning with her mother. And Hamya really splices these two settings into one another. And the arc of the book is not linear. It's neither following just the straight course of the book, nor is it following just the kind of straight chronology of Sophia's coming of age. You're getting these, again, spliced scenes of a really upsetting interaction from her youth on that trip in Italy. You're getting these memories of times that Sophia and her father shared that were actually really beautiful together. You're getting this kind of patchwork impression of this life that they've all had together. And it's totally chaotic, but also really beautiful in its messiness. And I think that's really elegant.
Yeah, I agree. The book doesn't feel like it's building out or forward. It feels like it's building down. The arc is like the increasing culpability of all of these people. At first you think Sophia's mad just because her dad was like hooking up with these strangers on vacation. And then you're like, okay, yeah, that's not great because she could clearly hear them, but also he is an adult and he's separated, all this stuff. And then you find out more of what happened on this vacation and you understand Sophia's rage. And then you're with Sophia and her mom and you're learning more about their family history. And so you're learning about that complexity. And so I feel like it was just almost like I just read Creation Lake, so caves are in my mind. It's almost like going into a cave and seeing this cavernous room. You're going down into the past, you're going down into their family dynamics, and then you just hit this like huge expanse that just opens everything up.
Yeah, and I think Hamya is really... We use this term a lot when we talk about books, which is economical or cool efficiency. And I've heard it so many times, I hardly know what it means anymore. I do think in this case, Hamya is so choosy about the images and the details that you get that I think it makes those moments where it feels like she's over-orating really fall flat, because she can have such a light touch where it's like all you need to know is that father's favorite paisley shirt that he wore on vacation also makes an appearance in the staging. And that is one of the things that broke his heart, to see that on stage to the point that he's going to have to burn it. And then, of course, knowing that that is a gift from Sophia's mother to him, which Sophia could not have understood. I hope everybody who listens to this podcast already believes in family systems theory. If not, I think this novel will convince you.
What is family systems theory?
Basically, hilarious that I am the only child with a single mom who's like, family systems, but it's true. It's like basically every dynamic or every kind of case of inner turmoil is also symptomatic of the family. Like something that happens to the individual is representative to the family unit as well. And even a broken family is still a unit with a sense of who's in and who's out and boundaries and all this stuff.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, this family is very broken. And yet at the same time, as we see in the book, like they have all of these different configurations. They're constantly together.
Well, and even just looking at Sophia's mother's alcoholism, for example, where this woman is getting blasted on like peak pool. Why are they even exporting that to London? That should stay in southern France, you know? And you've got this like sweaty piece of carpaccio. And it's, whoa, okay. Noted.
I am all for this melodrama just on so many different levels, right? Like in the father's book, on the stage, in just the book in our hands. It's a very melodramatic story. And like exactly that purple shirt, the way it pulls together so many competing emotions from this kind of trinity of family members is really fascinating. And yes, it's a broken family, but also ultimately you step back and you're kind of like, is it? Ultimately, yes, they all hurt each other, but there's also these really beautiful moments together. I keep saying that, but I don't know, the mother has just spent all of COVID doing her ex-husband's laundry, cleaning up after him, taking care of him in this completely non-sexualized, truly almost maternal, of course, but genuine way that she wants to take care of him. And the reader's kind of like, girl, why are you doing this? Yeah. But because she obviously cares for him. And as smarmy as the dad seems with women who are not really in the purview of this book, his lovers are relegated to this kind of sideshow. I shouldn't call it the but you know, at least to these women, you see him being really tender with them and not always acting so well, but he clearly loves Sophia, and that really comes through. I think there's also one aspect of this book that kept striking me, which is that this is a book about the stakes of autofiction, but it is very crucially recasting the work of autofiction as not... Sophia doesn't write a book. She writes a play. And I think that is really useful for Hamya, because the impact of this kind of shocking revelation where the father sits down and he's physically seeing himself as this avatar, and that and the immediacy of that, by the way, he's also surrounded by audience members who he's observe him represented. I mean, that immediacy of the theater, I think, is a really smart move for her to make.
I completely agree. And the other element is that it's being recorded, and he's behind, or he's right in front of that recording booth. And so you're watching him look at other people watch this show that is about him. He's trying to figure out whether they know he's there or not. And then for me, every time he's horrified by something, and then later on, he has his own tragedy in that theater. And you just remember, and this is being not just witnessed, but preserved, felt like the word that kept coming to mind for all of these characters is the word betrayal. They're all betraying each other in some type of way, explicitly or intentionally or not intentionally. And knowing that those betrayals are also being preserved felt like insult to injury there.
And also the knowledge that like this play is going to be staged every night and probably have some matinees for weeks to come. And I also was really struck by one comment that Sophia's mother made to her during lunch, where she was like, I didn't tell your father what this play was about, but how could you give me that burden of putting me, there you really see the toll of being the fulcrum between two artists. Sophia's mother actually mounts, I think, a pretty reasonable defense of her ex. We don't have to get into the specifics of like how bad of a husband was he actually on a scale of 1 to 10, but her mother is the only one who's positioned to say, actually, you and your dad have a lot more in common than you think. Just like, I know you think you're doing this cute thing, but like, you know where that comes from is daddy.
Devastating.
Totally,
Devastating.
Completely.
One of the things that you said, Lauren, was that this family does seem broken, but they're still together and they're taking care of each other, except through art. And they are savage in art, as exemplified by what Sophia is doing. But then also her dad is, I have a quote, because he's thinking about revenge. And he says, while seeing this play, too quickly, before there's time to stop it, he wonders whether he's supposed to reciprocate. What Sophia has done is undress him with clinical assurance, and perhaps he is supposed to do the same thing to her play. That feels bad to be like, not, I've been hurt by my daughter and I don't want to talk to her about it. I don't want to resolve it. It's my job to reciprocate. That feels unhealthy. But also, like, they're artists. That's what they do. Like, they're fighting through art, and art sets, like, I don't know, there's something about the battleground of art that was so intriguing to me.
Very Sisyphean, right? Where they're each going to be like rolling their rock up the hill, where it's shaking their fist at the sky at each other. It's actually quite tragic. Another thing that I appreciate about a novel that I agree should and could credibly be called melodrama is the pathos in this book, right? There were moments where I was so physically uncomfortable on everybody's behalf. And I think that a lot of this is part and parcel of her real skill. I think it's setting up scenes in the novel. So towards the end, there's that scene where Sophia's father is really distraught and he's crying on a bridge and he's finding his way to like, I don't remember, a Pret maybe? And he's trying to like, and he needs to go to the bathroom because he's almost wet himself and his prostate is enlarged and he's old, in case you've forgotten. And it's okay, but you have to buy a brioche first and now you have to have a code. And now he's in this like squalid cafe bathroom and he's crying and Sophia's crying and it's like this choppy FaceTime. And I was just like, gutted. And I just think that every single intelligent decision that Hamya made to set that up just allowed the emotion to really come through unfiltered in a way. It never felt like it actually added to the immediacy of the feeling as a reader.
That is an excellent point. But Joumana, there was something else that you said off mic that I was so interested in. And wait, can you just tell us more?
Oh, God. As I was getting ready for this podcast, I was thinking like, God, there's so much I wish I'd been able to get into in the review. But the thing that really struck me in terms of overall structure of this book was that it's still kind of an open question who the hypocrite of the title is. But Hamya is really canny in terms of how the reader is introduced to Sophia and her father. Because if you look at the beginning and the last sections of the book, they're actually from the perspectives of the women that look after Sophia and her father. So the first taste is from Sophia's mother, and then the last section is this sort of indignant stream of consciousness from the caretaker on the island, the Sicilian island where they have their vacation. And I think that is such a wonderful choice on Hamya's part to give them the voice and their perspective to like open and close the book.
You said this and it unlocked something. I had not considered that. I did think about the ending with Elena because I think it's a perfect ending. She is throwing away the copy of the book that the husband was writing when he was there. And it is so snarky and also you get this kind of cerebral novel about all of these big ideas, and then you have someone that's just, this is not for me at all. And I thought that was such a good counterbalance to the rest of the book. And it also reminded me of the ending of The Life of the Mind by Christine Smallwood, which also involves some trash. So that's what I was thinking about. But the idea that the book is bookended by caretakers is something that I found fascinating and I hadn't considered.
We should be hearing from caretakers more often. That's what I want. That's what I have to say. Rise up, caretaker nation.
I am with you on that point. And speaking of bringing in other voices, we have a bunch of reader comments that I want to get to. But first, let's take a quick break. And we're back. I'm MJ Franklin. I'm an editor here at the New York Times Book Review. I'm joined by Joumana Khatib and Lauren Christensen, and we are talking about The Hypocrite by Jo Hamya. Right before the break, we were talking about bringing in other voices and reader comments, and that is what we're here to do now. This month, for the first time, we launched a new and expanded Reader Hub. The goal was to find new ways to foster conversation with readers and with listeners and bring them into our discussion here. And I have to say, this experiment made my heart sing. The conversations were so rich. I loved watching you not only read along with us, but also chat with each other. I was like, oh my gosh, they're being friends. I just felt very proud and happy overall. So I just want to say a huge thank you, thank you, thank you. So I'm going to jump into it, and we have some conversation starters. One of the things readers have been chatting about in our hub is the ending of the book, the moment Sophia and her father finally talk, and readers were divided on it. I have a few comments I wanted to read. HC from Canada said, I loved this book, but I was a little unsatisfied with the meeting phone call dialogue. I was expecting them to have an all-out philosophical debate about the merits of their own art, about the significance of their different but shared memories, and who was the bigger hypocrite. Sophia dissolving into tears and the father patting her on the head to say the play was good showed no growth from this experience on either part. So that was one response. Another person, VA from NYC, says, the final phone call between Sophia and her father never went to the full fireworks I was expecting, but it was searing for other reasons, mainly because of the full humiliation of the father having to take his food into what sounds like a pretty nasty bathroom. And yet it's Sophia who breaks down sobbing. Truly two generations of hypocrites. Two other people, E. Marin from Silver Spring and Frank from Rochester, thought it was funny that the conversation was interrupted by a social media professional. And then the last thing I want to say is Steve from Denton says, the emotional devastation, pants peed, tears shed, felt cathartic and physical after lengthy, heady intellectual material, e.g. conversations with round glasses, etc. Anyway, those are some reader responses. I'm curious, what did you think of that final showdown? I'm going to start with you, Lauren.
I think it's appropriate, almost as if fiction doesn't actually change the course of human life, right? I mean, I kept thinking throughout this whole book, where does Hamya come down, right? I guess that's also this whole problem with autofiction or something. We're trying to read the author's life into, not that I'm assuming that Hamya herself has experienced any side of this, but just like where are her sympathies? Is she on the side of the younger generation or the older? And I think ultimately the impression I get from this book is that it is very kind of ambivalent. It's a really, you said a kind of moral vacuum. I think it's a total moral ambivalence. I think there's a lot of different directions that people are being pulled, and especially just the directions that fiction is being pulled. On the one hand, yeah, these people can't communicate with each other, and they're using expensive plays in the middle of a pandemic as a way to just say, Dad, hold my hand, tell me I'm worthy. You know, That's something a therapist could be used for. But I think this idea that, okay, there's not really an actual barrier that's crossed in the person-to-person, face-to-face communication it didn't come as a surprise to me, that this is a really flawed way of communicating with someone you love. And to me, that's throwing up your hands like, okay, it's a work of art. Were you entertained?
I also agree because for me, it was reestablishing the stakes. Throughout the entire book, I was like, oh, like, when's the big reveal going to happen? When are we going to learn more about what happened in the past? But at the end of the day, the stakes are just like, a father and a daughter trying to connect.
That's the thing. It's like a Henry James novel. Like we were saying, okay, these people are so broken. Well, they're not that broken. Nothing really, really damaging goes on between the three of them, right? They all are actually fairly good to each other. Yeah. Deeply, deeply flawed. I feel like I'm not forgetting something crazy, right? I mean, bad stuff happens, but it's not perpetrated by the mother, the father, or the daughter. Of course, they need a lot of group therapy, but they're not really mistreating each other. And so there's just this huge drama around micro moments.
Mm-hmm.
He's not even that absent of a dad. Yeah, it's a divorced family. It's a broken household, but he's there. He never stops loving her. He never stops thinking about her. And, he's at one point, it's like, I stepped back and let your mother do the main parenting, but that does feel genuine.
Mm-hmm.
And he did, where, that moment where he was like, I would give Sophia the books I was reading so we would have something to talk about. I mean, hello, Narcissus, your car is here. But at least he's trying in the language he has. And totally deeply flawed. And listen, I've had my life changed by novels, but not in real time. I just also, I'm not sure that people change all that much. Right. So the idea that while I hear you, readers, I am totally sympathetic to that feeling of almost so close to satisfaction and it just being out of reach. I actually think that's the conceit of the book, where you can work and work and work and work and still come up short.
Yep.
And I don't know. These are flawed, emotionally stunted British people.
Oh my God.
I don't know. I've seen enough.
We're about to have a whole country coming after us, Joumana.
Great.
For me, I feel like I think I was a little bit disappointed, partially because it's that very real human feeling of when you think of the perfect response and then you have the conversation, you forget everything, you forget to say it. I feel like that was happening in this book. You could see everything that these characters wanted to say to each other that they're building up to, and then you get to the ending and it is a pivot. So I felt disappointed in that aspect, but I also really, really appreciated it. And I thought it was the perfect way to end it because it's so true to life. Mm-hmm. Lauren, speaking of reader comments, there was a comment that you saw that you wanted to dive into.
Yeah. So CT from Canada wrote in, early in the novel, the narrator suggests that Sophia's father wrote his novels as thinly veiled explorations of his identity. Quote, he had written them because he had, with the safety provided by the barrier of fiction, wanted to show the world some of his selves, end quote. CT continues, Sophia's decision to weaponize her play seeks to expose these different selves of her father, but she assumes the veil of fiction won't protect him. She expects her accusations to land directly on him, not just as a character in her play, but as the real person, especially within the context of their relationship. What felt missing for me in the novel, or what becomes my responsibility as a reader, is to turn this revelatory impulse back onto Sophia herself. What does her play through the artifice of fiction reveal about her? Is it a form of justice, in her view, to expose her father in this way? She doesn't appear liberated by the work she's created, so why doesn't she write a play that would set her free? Art doesn't need to merely reflect how the world is or has been. It can also suggest new ways of being and relating. This comment, to me, it opened up so many avenues of thought. I think it's incredibly smart. One of the things that I wanted to respond to in this is what CT felt was missing. I do think that the book turns this revelatory impulse back onto Sophia to the extent that, first of all, neither of these artists are actually that successful at thinly veiling, right? Their explorations of themselves. Like, these are very clear. They're laying it on thick. This is not, there's nothing really subtle about the autofiction here. One of the things I really like is, I guess Sophia keeps insisting, it's not my dad. The character in my play is not my dad. And then at the end, when they are face to face, she and her father, she's, of course it's you, and there's a relief in that. There's a catharsis in that. I do think that there is a turning back. And like we're saying, it's not who's the hypocrite. Well, they both are. Like, I don't think that Hamya spares Sophia in any way from the kind of moral complexity and the implication of writing about your life. But this idea of safety provided by the barrier of fiction, there's nothing safe in either of these works of art. I mean, both of these artists are really putting themselves on the line in this kind of uncomfortable way.
They are putting themselves on the line, but with a distance and a buffer, right? Like, they're not confronting each other directly, because when they do, they burst down into tears. Instead, they're drilling down into the work. Her father is now thinking about transcription, the way sentences sound, and Sophia is thinking about how to stage something. How do you get the props to set? All of that stuff. In that way, the work does provide safety because it provides a distance, but it's also another way of making yourself very vulnerable. To your point about that you did think that there was that revelatory turn, I agree. I thought there was that revelatory turn too. And I think that's just Sophia realizing, I'm hurting this person too. I think that's why she starts sobbing. She feels guilty because even though she doesn't say it, she does understand what she has done in some type of way, shape, or form. Yeah, what did you think, Joumana, about art as a battleground? And
it's telling that we actually never see or even experience either Sophia or her dad's work unfiltered. It's like the dad is like recounting the play to the reader, or she uses a really evocative phrase when she's talking about it with her mother, where she's like, when I read his novels, it's like seeing a rape scene in a film, which is like, whoa. And her mom's, well, he actually wasn't that bad, And it's like, I mean, at that point, she'd had 2 glasses of wine. She wasn't like totally 3 sheets to the wind. It was one of those moments where it's like, oh yeah, what are the actual stakes? Because you get the sense that Sophia's dad has never really, part of the psychic distress that he's feeling is that he's never necessarily come up with, and he's never confronted any profound personal ramifications in response to his art until he sees the play. And which is why he's going through this really, I'm saying childish, but I don't mean it as a value judgment, but it's like he's indignant, he's embarrassed, like the shame. These are all like really primary colors. I think that these are fundamental emotions that like you feel as a person. And Sophia, I think, has been staggering under the weight of consequence, even before she's begun her own artistic career. So it's just a different balance for me.
I actually just thought of something that I think is going to connect back to Elena.
Yes.
Is that?
Yes, I love Elena. Justice for Elena.
Yeah. When we're talking about the stakes, we're circling around this trinity right now, the mother, father, and daughter. But actually, when you just step out to their kind of immediate, the 1 degree of satellite characters, Elena being this caretaker, as you said, who day in and day out supports this household that they are living in Sicily. This is back in the memory of 10 years ago when father and daughter are writing this book, or father is writing the book, dictating to Sophia. And meanwhile, in the background of this kind of artistic project that the 2 of them are feeling very charged about in different ways, Elena is the apparatus on which this thing is standing, right? Like, she's cooking every meal. She's taking care of the house. The father and daughter are slobs. Like, every day, I've just cleaned this. How is there more food in this fridge that is spoiled? What are you guys doing that you have no thought to pick up after yourself? And I think at the end, really, and listen, I feel like I've actually come off like defending the father in this episode. I don't like him. I want to set that record straight. But the most damning moment for me was toward the end when you really see like how he's so flirtatious with Elena. All so the summer they spend, the whole trip, he's really, oh my dear, you're flirting with me, whatever. He performs this gratitude. And at the end, he's like, how can I ever repay you? And she's like, well, you can thank me in the acknowledgments to your book. And he's like, oh, brilliant idea. Of course I'll do that. And so, as you mentioned before, at the end, he sends her this book. He puts a little leaf a loose leaf page.
Yep.
He sticks into the book. He doesn't even give her a permanent page in the book. And that lameness, listen, that's not a trauma. It's not it's not a violence, but that really got me. I was furious at him and just disgusted. And it's that, talk about economy. What a small moment, but Hamya really lands it. And you're just like, that's who this man is.
Yeah.
He's just a small, really pathetic guy, especially. And this woman made his book possible.
Yeah. And talk about moral vacuum, holding both sides up, because I felt that rage too. And yet I also in a weird way liked this man. And I think part of the reason is that intermission scene where there's something we haven't spoken about yet, but he goes out in the intermission, he wants to go smoke, and there's someone else there who recognizes him, and they have a debate about his work, but then also she is dunking on his daughter's play to her.
Right.
And the way that he comes out of that theater hurting and defensive, and then without missing a beat starts defending his daughter felt really sweet to me. I feel like I can't end defending this man, but that's what we have just done.
Well, it's just him. He's just sad. He's this sad, lonely guy who's kind of estranged his family.
This book is just, I don't know, it's endlessly complicated and thoughtful. And I feel like we could talk about it all day, but we do have an exciting second segment. So before we pivot, I just want to say thank you to those readers who chimed in. I wish we had more time to dive into more comments, but please keep up the conversation. We have an article headlined Book Club Read The Hypocrite by Hamya with the book review. Continue talking about the book there. Inspired by this book's look at art monsters, or the complications of creating art, people doing bad things through art that just hurts us, I'm going to throw it over to you, Joumana. What's your favorite art monster book or a book about a complicated artist?
Okay, I've got a three-way tie. If you have only a little bit of time, but you want maximum horror in terms of time spent, I would say you should read the third volume of Helen Garner's diaries, because she's married to a novelist named Murray Bale, but he's called V in the novel, or in the diary, and it's tough. Right? It's just two writers in a marriage. He's cheating, but was he cheating on her on his work? It's tough. It's very, very tough. If you know a writer and maybe you've been mixed up with a writer, your blood will run cold, hypothetically speaking. I also really like Lisa Halliday's novel Asymmetry, which I think is a fictionalized account, or it's a work of fiction that draws on her experience having a romantic relationship with Philip Roth, who is several decades older than her. And then I think my favorite, and I feel like I'm scooping you, Lauren, because I know you love her too, but I think everybody should read Life with Picasso by Françoise Gillot. She was his longtime partner, mother of two of his kids, and she wrote this incredible rebuttal, really powerful on her own terms of what it was like to be enthralled to him and then also kind of mixed up with him. It's an incredible piece of literature. She got basically exiled from Paris for it. I love it.
My only challenge with these recommendations is time. How am I want to read all of them, and when am I going to get to do this? But I'm adding them all to my reading list.
And Lauren, you literally interviewed Françoise, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. For some reason, the examples I'm coming up with are all about marriages, too. So I'm not, the ones off the top of my head are not father-daughter, but I guess just in recent reading and viewing, there's Danzy Senna's Colored Television, as well as Sarah Manguso's Liars, which are both told from the perspectives of female writers who are married to artists, I will say. And I wouldn't say monsters in either case. You really get to see the kind of dynamics at play in a household where childcare is an issue, just division of labor is an issue, and two people are trying to have the creative space, and what the ethics are of using each other's time and lives in a certain way. And then I'm thinking of Anatomy of a Fall. Talk about just a really horrific example of what can happen when a husband and wife use each other's lives in their work.
Lauren, you won't say monsters for Liars, but I will. The husband
that
in
one,
that book,
yeah.
The husband in that book made me want to light something on fire.
He's pretty monstrous.
What about you, MJ?
The book that came to mind for me is Daughter by Claudia Day. This came out last year, and it's also about a novelist father and a playwright daughter, but it's not necessarily about the daughter writing about the father. Instead, it's about the very, very intricate complications of this family. The father remarries and he basically abandons his children, his biological children, for this new family. And the daughter, who's now this playwright, is furious, understandably, but she still wants the approval and love of her dad. And so it's about their connection. The new wife forbids the father from seeing the daughter, so they have this connection, but it's secret. You find out later that the daughter, if I'm remembering correctly, the daughter has a tragedy later in the book, and the father's not there to support her, but then you find out that he's written about it later, which is its own type of betrayal. So what I loved about it is the complications of this family, but also the writing is sharp. That dialogue is on point. Like, everything is so cutting, so incisive. I finished it and I was like, holy crap, to use the PG-13 version of what I said. It's so sharp. And also, in interviews, Claudia Day has said that the book itself is not autofiction, but she wanted it to feel like it because she wanted that illicit thrill of voyeurism when you're reading the book.
That's so funny. That's like the exact opposite of what people, right? Oh, this is my life, but I'm going to make it seem like it's not my life.
Yeah. And she's like, it's not my life, but I want it to seem like it is. I want
you to think. That is so cool.
Yeah. So that's my recommendation, Daughter by Claudia Day.
She's just dunked on autofiction.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
With that, I think that's all the time that we have today. Lauren, Joumana, I just want to say a huge thank you. This was super, super fun.
Always a treat.
Thank you, MJ.
And thank you to everyone who read along with us. Please keep the conversation going. Again, we have an article page on the New York Times' website, headlined Book Club. Read The Hypocrite with the book review. Continue to share your thoughts and talk with other readers about the book there. And also, I teased at the beginning of the episode that we were going to reveal our October book, and now is the time. Next month, in October, we're reading, you guessed it, Intermezzo by Sally Rooney. How could we not? It's like, she is the zeitgeist at a certain point. How could we avoid weighing in? So that is our book club pick. We hope you'll join us. And in the meantime, happy reading.
That was MJ Franklin, Joumana Khatib, and Lauren Christensen in our latest book club roundtable discussion, talking about Joe Hamya's The Hypocrite. I'm Gilbert Cruz, editor of the New York Times Book Review. Thanks for listening.